Hi everybody, welcome to our presentation for Chapter 6 from our higher education textbook. We're going to be really talking about risk management here, which I think it's important to note that a lot of concepts that we talk about in risk management are identical from high school to high school or K-12 ed to higher education. The pitfalls are legislatively influenced though more than anything else. Because really legislation can interfere and sometimes what they expected you to have isn't there. So I think that's an important consideration for this chapter. The common issues, we're going to discuss all of these really as a part of this chapter, but I want to highlight this notion of chronic and one-time problems in higher education. That tends to be more of an issue in higher education, dealing with maybe a larger group of people that are going through a program versus a smaller group of people that are going through. One-time problems, maybe there's a faculty member who's not fitting with the organizational culture or the environment, that sort of thing. And also political and personal issues involved in managing change within the unit as well. So I repeat this over and over again. I think organizational theory matters so much in finance. They work hand in hand. I was faculty in an early childhood department before I came to my current position, and my job was never safe in Pennsylvania. Early childhood is subsidized, it's state funded. If the state funding gets cut, I'm out of a job. So in Ed and Min is working with future principals and current principals, I have more job security than I do in early childhood. But when you're a human in a capitalistic position, you have to know that because your job could go at any time, and you have to keep that in mind. And I think that's a big idea, and that's really a driver in what we do in this profession. So you have to know about the budget history of the organization as well. Think about the program here. It's new, it had to be funded from somewhere, and something had to encourage it. But there were certain constituents that contributed to the budget and people that supported it. And you have a large group of people that are going through this program at this time. My guess is in future years it won't be as many as a group of 22 as it is. And if, thinking about that, I'm assuming there was a strategic plan to hire new faculty members, recruit them, grow the program, and kind of that sort of thing in order to develop it. Some of you work at institutions with different budgeting and complex capabilities. I really stress again too that you're going to have a budgeting system where you have to help the higher power make the decision because they might not know it, and your scope of influence means a lot more in higher education than it does in K-12. Many of the budget decisions in K-12, you don't have control over them. They've already been determined and they've already been done. So try to understand who the higher powers are, who the big players are, and who the budgeting decisions that you're making are going to contribute and help in the long run. And if you can do that, you're going to be a million times more effective than somebody who has not taken the time to learn that in an organization. So you have to really differentiate between what long-term budgeting issues look like and what short-term budgeting issues are. Supplies and services are rising across the United States, and this is causing higher education a very difficult position of making difficult budgeting decisions. And because of that, we're experiencing inflation, but we're not adjusting salaries as well. You have to think about each cost and whether departmentally it's going to benefit the department or whether it's not. So I think that's another big idea too that you have to at least mention. So when a change exists, there's normally resistance. When a program is cut, people complain. When a program is added, people complain. You have to give people warning in higher education, especially because you're dealing with people that are on, either a 4-year trajectory at a traditional undergrad. And I'm saying 4-year, but in all reality, some people might be there for 5 or 6 years. You're also on with people that are on maybe a 2-year graduate program or a 3-year doctorate. So getting people involved in that change process is a big idea, and it's important. So I'm going to talk about some of these common pitfalls. I think this is a big idea, and this is something that I want you to know going into this. Some of them hit home with me, like handshake deals. I've worked at places where I've had handshake deals, and the handshake deal did not come through. So if you have appropriate planning, you can avoid kind of the pitfall that exists with things like this. So informal agreements are very difficult in higher education. Get everything in writing. I have been burned so many times by informal agreements in higher ed, but I can honestly say, as I'm recording this, I can't think of one instance in K-12 when I was ever burned. I've been positioned for, I've known something could go wrong, but in higher ed, I was positioned for something, it didn't go the way that it was supposed to, but I think that's because organizationally there's a lot of constituents, a lot of people that are in charge of situations, and it creates a challenge. So that's important. Understand that handshake deals are a no-no, and it shouldn't be something that you should rely exclusively on. So this is massive problem in higher education. Revenue is significantly overestimated in higher education, more than K-12, because in K-12 you're smart enough to know, if there's 400 students in third grade, there's probably going to be 400 students in fourth grade next year, right? And you only have to speculate who's coming in the district as preschoolers or kindergartners, depending on your configuration. Higher education, you get optimistic, you say this program's going to go well. People think they can do great things, and they don't have the fiscal capabilities to do so. Failure to accurately estimate revenue can cause problems down the road. Sometimes you get what you want, but the assessor's the one that has to deal with the poor decisions that you made. So you are, in this profession, especially higher education, going to pay for the sins that somebody made before you. And that's just the God's honest truth about higher education. So postponing a problem, people do that all the time. They push aside an issue until the next person comes in, and then they deal with it, especially when you have people that are in interim capacities. If you don't document potential problems, this can come back on you, which is much more common in higher education than it is in K-12. So sometimes faculty leaders don't ask for help when needed. They don't want to seem incompetent, and we're dealing with an arrogant profession in general. Higher education is full of people that have terminal degrees who have proven themselves time and time again, and they want to be taken seriously and they want to be respected. So you're dealing with people who feel like they know everything that's right, and that's going to be challenging. But if you find a couple people you trust and work with them, that's going to make your life better and your conditions better organizationally. So hidden costs creep up on you more than anything else. That's the same in K-12 as it is in higher ed. Utility charges, budget issues when a new program starts and they don't have enough faculty members to it. When you think about hiring a new faculty member, you have to think about their office space, their equipment, support systems, time engaged in training them, their salary, their benefits. All of this can be a massive problem and a massive challenge. So you do have to know what the long-term goal is for a program. If you're doing a cohort-based model and funding ends, you owe the students the responsibility to finish the program and give them necessary support. I was involved in a 2-and-2 partnership before I came to my current position, and they ended the program, but I knew the program was ending and I had the opportunity to transition the students out. Cohort-based doctoral programs are the same thing. If you're admitting new students every year, you have to know what that looks like and what the enrollment is going to be in order to make the cohort model work and be acceptable. So, failure to identify multi-year consequences. People change, programs change. The standards change constantly. If NCATE or CAPE come back and say a program needs a new course, the program gets a new course. Those of you that are administrators relating this to K-12, you know that in ed leadership programs across the United States now, we now have to add in a standalone class in data-driven assessment by 2017. And every program has to do this, but then you have to cut something else out. What goes, what you cut out to put that in. When you're already teaching in a model that has a law class, a community class, a finance class, a human resources class, an introductory principalship class, a supervision class, an organizational theory class, something has to go to get the new class. So every new program is a game, and that's something that you have to figure out what the consequences could be in the beginning and what they potentially mean in the organization. So you have to understand how this applies to others as well. This is a human profession, and every decision that you make impacts everybody else in every program. If you cut a program that people were planning on attending, that they were going to go to your school to do, they're not going to go to your school. They could switch to another program that could increase enrollment, or they could just go somewhere else. If you have programs with only a few faculty members, that puts more work on their plate, which is going to make them angry. And as I said before, we have egos in this profession, so you're going to deal with egos, so that could be a problem too. So you have to make sure that you're helpful with ethical practices and beliefs, and I think that goes without saying. So any article on higher education says that across the United States, funding really was gone in 2008. People weren't prepared for these changes. They weren't under the impression that the funding was going to disappear as drastically as it did. It went to online programs, but funding's coming back. Like, this is the time to get a job as a professor. It really is. I don't know if it's going to be in 3 years, but we won't know which way the tide has turned, and that's one of the biggest challenges in higher ed in general. So, some advice to new budget managers. I think this is generalist, but I think it's something that you can take with you, and you might be able to get something out of some of these suggestions. So, first advice is to ask questions, because as I've said before, and I continue to repeat, in higher education you are dealing with people that have massive egos. They think they're the experts, they know they're the experts on something, and people don't ask for help. Don't let the ego get in the way of information regarding problems and programs and things that can actually be organizationally beneficial to you. Big idea. Be prepared in case the mission of the department and the mission of the university or college changes as well while you're part of it. The big thing in education programs, if those of you that are here are going to pursue education degrees, keep in mind that education right now is moving towards urban school reform and social justice. So knowing that, that's what the department is going to reflect, that's what the department's going to look like. So know that that's what the future is, and you have to have that background to be necessarily effective and to be in those organizations, because that is what the future is going to look like. So I think it's important to note that you have an ethical responsibility to actually care about your staff and be credible to them and tell them honestly if there's a problem or if something's going to change. If you know that there's a difficult decision coming, you have to let people know that this could happen in the upcoming fiscal year. I would not wait till the last minute in higher education, because it's going to affect the classes they teach, it could affect their access to schools, it could affect their research. It's a big problem. So try to at least be open with people. Figure out what advice decision makers need. If you're going to switch a program to an online program, know what the costs and benefits are of doing that. And it helps you inform the people that are going to make the decisions, and you can at least report back to them and say, here's the positives to switching to this, here are the negatives to switching to this is why I chose to do this is why I think it's a big idea, and why I think it could benefit the school as well. So it goes without saying too, not to play games, and I'm going to go over some of the 5 most common games that exist in higher education. You're not going to avoid these, but I think you should know them and understand them if you're going into a higher education position. And you're going to discuss these as part of one of your discussion boards. So everybody inflates the budget request. I've seen this a million times. But they do it trying to get 80% of what they wanted. They submit for this large, giant budget, and we inflate it, and we say it's going to be a big, great budget, and then it doesn't work. But then if it does, it'll only work a couple times. Then you'll look like the city who doesn't have a clue. If you do it, only do it a few times in your career and kind of keep it in your back pocket, because you may be able to do it and make it work, but I would only do this a few times. So I think withholding, if money's coming in, or pending revenue is a massive problem that people do in programs all the time, but you can only play dumb for so long. If you're transparent, which I've said a million times in here, you have to be transparent as leaders. that's going to make a massive difference in your credibility in higher education, more so than in K-12. Because K-12, I hate to say it, but you can always blame the district level. In higher ed, is the department chair, you're on the chopping block, and you got to know that going into it. So some people only give the worst scenarios to their faculty and give them gloom and doom. Then when something really goes bad, they're not prepared for it, and they don't think it's going to really happen. But it's a credibility issue, and that's bad. This is illegal, and you shouldn't be doing it. But what some people will do is they'll hide money in inflated line items, and they'll put it in a reserve account. If a doctoral program in leadership gets a certain amount of funding, should you switch it out to something else and move it over? But people do this all the time. But there could be legal and ethical violations in this as well. So politics is horrible. You're going to get it anywhere, but I do want to say this because I differ from the authors. I think students are consumers. If you do a good job, the students support you. If you don't do a good job, the students don't support you. And they're consumers of the product that you have to offer. I'm against this model that they present in the book. I disagree with it, but it's something that you need to know because it does happen. So you have to know who the stakeholders are. Higher ed, it's a lot of different people. It's community members, it's a board of trustees, it's a provost, it's a department chair, it's a tenured faculty member. It is much different than K-12 education. So please keep that in mind as well. People, you're dealing with more arrogant people in higher education than you ever would in K-12. People do have advanced degrees in this profession, and all of you do too. You're all going to have a title of doctor, and hopefully you take it and you use it and you advance your work and you advance your practice. But people in this field in higher ed don't say I don't know as much as people do in K-12. So it's better not to know something than to make a decision that goes wrong, and don't forget that. So pay attention to details. Look for things that are computational errors. Look for things that could cause a problem down the road. That's also another idea, and focus on the big picture as well. If you need legal information, that's why the university pays for legal counsel. University stakeholders, you're in a different setting. They do pay for legal counsel. Know that. Know that for personnel issues, especially when you're dealing with a tenure-based program as well. So one more chapter to look in this textbook. I'm going to go over budget fluctuations. If I can do anything to help, as always, please let me know. But then this is it, and we've covered all of the stuff in our higher education textbook. Thank you.